Hey bookworms, welcome back to my channel and to a little bit of a different video today. If you've been following me, you know that I like to do lists of favorite and least favorite, but usually I'm talking about my personal favorite. Today I'm going to talk about my husband's top 10 most favorite books, which was actually his idea to do. He chose 10 books and told me a little bit about them, even though I knew the story behind most of them and why they're so important to him. By the way, as you will notice, he will not be in this video. He's more of the behind the camera kind of a guy. But as I said, he told me a little bit about them and why he chose them and why they are on his favorite and deserve to be in the top 10. So let's get started without any particular order, except the last one. The last one is number 1, his most favorite, most important book. But other than that, no particular order. I'll try to do it a bit interesting with the genres. And I do think it's very interesting. I think you can learn a lot about a person from his favorites. So let's get started. Let's get to know the hubby. So let's start with the heaviest book in the bunch. It's this thing. Oh god, it's heavy. It's a photography book by Ansel Adams. Like I said, he's the behind the camera kind of a guy. He's actually a photographer, and Ansel Adams, he's his favorite, or at least one of his favorite photographers. He was working in the 50s through 70s, I think, and he mostly does beautiful, amazing black and white nature photos. Now, if you're into photography, you probably have heard of him. But just think about the fact that because of the time where he worked, he didn't have any digital cameras, he didn't go and photoshopped his photos afterwards. He is considered the father of HDR. I even bookmarked 2 photos that I want to share with you just as a little example. First one is this. I really hope you can see it well in the camera. I think it's, just look at how beautiful it is. I think nature is a lot more appealing and beautiful than people or like man-made things. I don't know, that's just my opinion, and I love photos of waterfalls and mountains and stuff. So that's the first one. And the second one is this one. Look how beautiful the forest. And I mentioned HDR, and it has to do with light. Just look the way light looks here. It's so amazing. I really hope the camera does it justice. So that was the first one. Now let's move on to some fiction, or to be more precise, science fiction, because he's a very big fan of sci-fi. And the next one is called The Electric Church by Jeff Sommers, and this is actually a first book of a series. The first book, according to him, is the best one, and also I think first book of a series is a good representative of the entire series. Like I said, this is science fiction, and unfortunately it's been a little while since he actually told me about each book, so I kind of don't really remember exactly about the plot. I'm sorry. But there is a church there, and the people, like the monks there, are kind of like cyborg or technologically enhanced or something of that sort. And if I remember correctly, and he's gonna watch this video and correct me, they started as human beings, but they didn't choose to become whatever it is they become, like cyborgs or whatever. They were forced to do it. And my husband liked to compare this book to the first few Die Hard movies. For him, it's like the Die Hard of science fiction. I mean, the plot has pretty much nothing to do with it, but the protagonist here is like John McClane. That's Bruce Willis. He fights the bad guys, he does some action, he wins, but he's not a superhero. He gets hurt, he loses friends, some people die. He's not invincible, you know, which makes him a bit more relatable. Let's continue with a classic. And the third book, maybe you've heard about it, it's a little famous, Dracula by Bram Stoker. There is a good reason why this book is a classic. It's very simple. Also, vampires, Victorian London, a little bit of humor with lots of blood. Where can you go wrong? Generally speaking, that's his favorite Victorian horror novel, I think. He hates Frankenstein to the core. He cannot stand this book. Jekyll and Hyde was a little too short for him, and I agree. I mean, there could have been more. And Dorian Gray was okay, but then there's this part in the middle where he starts talking about his tone collection and you think, what? Maybe for a Victorian reader it was easier, but for modern readers, I think many people are like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? But anyway, Dracula, great book, great writing, very interesting plot, a classic. And from classic to some more modern classic, we're back to science fiction with Dune by Frank Herbert. Not only did I read this book, but I also did a review on Dune not too long ago. I will link it down below so if you want to check it out. Like with Dracula, there is a very good reason why this book is so beloved and didn't disappear in time in the midst of so many other, maybe similar books from the same genre. The story is great, the characters are great, they're very, very interesting. This is how you build a fictional world. Not to mention, huge sandworms. By the way, this is the first book of a series. I've heard that they just get worse and worse as they progress. I'm not sure if I'll ever gonna read the rest of them. If you have, let me know. We're changing genres again, and this time we go into another kind of format that my husband really likes, comics. And this one that he chose is Lobo Chained. I asked him and then I asked him again because I forgot and I forgot again. I'm sorry if that's really the first one or like a special edition or something special. I think it's the latter and not actually the first Lobo comic. But I know that this is a special Lobo comics, generally speaking. Notice the nylon to keep it in mint condition. Lobo is not one of the really famous comics, at least for people who are not really into comics. I mean, in recent years we had the Avengers, we had the new DC comic universe, etc. I think Lobo can be kind of compared to Deadpool. It's a very violent, bloody, torture porn sort of a comic. I think it's the combination of violence and gore and comedy which makes it so appealing, and that's why he loves it so much. It's a very kind of anti-hero, anti-Superman sort of a comic. Another important point is that the creator, one of them is Alan Grant, that I know he really likes him. He wrote another thing that was very famous, but of course I forgot. I am such a bad listener. I usually do remember what he tells me. There are a lot of things that I learned from him and from the things that he likes, but I just remember he likes Alan Grant. I just don't remember what he wrote other than Lobo that he really liked. Sorry. I feel like I'm not doing a very good job here. I mean, I'm introducing books, but I think I could have done more and talked a little more in depth about them. But it's always difficult when you haven't read them yourself. I mean, I did read some of them, but not all of them. So let's move on to something a little easier. One of the books by Luis Royo, or maybe Louis Royo, I think is Spanish. I'm not sure actually if you pronounce the S or not. But this book is called Subversive Beauty. And he does have a few books by him, but he chose this one, which I agree, it is very beautiful. If you don't know who Louis or Luis Royo is, he is a painter and he usually paints fantasy, science fiction and horror themed sexy women with very minimalist clothing, and yeah, enough said, right? But I myself really love his painting. I think his paintings are absolutely beautiful. And just a side note, if you're in a situation like me or maybe the other way around, I often feel like people are really surprised that I'm totally okay with my husband's looking at almost naked women, whether they're painting or in internet. I honestly have no problem with it, and I don't see a reason why. I don't get jealous. I mean, if you're in a relationship, especially hetero relationship, do you get jealous if your significant other is looking at other beautiful human beings? I mean, if he's looking at something really cool, I would usually just join him. Enough dirty details from our personal lives, but like with the Ansel Adams photography book, I bookmarked two paintings that I wanted to show you, just to give you a bit of a taste of what his paintings look like. It was really difficult for me, by the way, to only choose two because I honestly think that his paintings are gorgeous. This is the first one. It's definitely one of my favorites. It just I think the art here is beautiful, and also the imagination. He does love doing tattoos and different hair colors and this like weird piercing things. And yeah, I think this picture, sorry, it's not a photo. It's absolutely beautiful. And the second one is, I'll try to kind of show everything. I think this one is my favorite. I just think it's so beautiful. I forgot to mention that most women that he paints also have weapons. I mean, seriously, sexy women, minimal clothing, tattoos, and weapons. Where can you go wrong? Okay, we're at number 7. This time is a very funny book that I am dying to read because he told me so much about it. It's called Psycho Shop by Alfred Baxter, right? Yeah, Alfred Baxter and Roger Zelazny. If you know the name, he wrote the 9 Princes of Amber and the entire Amber series. And from what I understood, what happened was that Bester wrote this book but then died before he could complete it, and the rest was completed by Zelazny. It wasn't really a collaboration. But nonetheless, this book is hilarious. It's about, you know, a shop that pretty much have everything, like a funny version of Needful Things. Although my husband usually compares it a little bit to Doctor Who. Strangely enough, he cannot stand the show Doctor Who, but nonetheless he says a little bit like that because it's a very kind of crazy British humor, and they go back in time and meet real people. I know that Edgar Allan Poe appears here, and I'm just dying to read this book because he told me, as I said, so much about it. And look at it, it's a pretty short book. It should be very kind of cute and fun, kind of pass the time and make you feel better afterwards. So I mentioned that he's a huge science fiction fan, but let's not forget a little bit of some good fantasy. Next book is called Die Zwerge, which translates to English to The Dwarfs by Markus Heitz. This is a book in German. I mentioned before that I read German in order to improve my German. My husband does so as well, but his German is a lot better than mine. He can actually read this sort of book in German. He's actually fluent. And this is the first book that he read in German that was originally in German, you know, wasn't translated. So when it comes to fantasy, I often feel that the dwarves are kind of like a side character. They're usually there to help, maybe to be a bit of a comic relief. And here they're actually the main characters, which is one of the reasons why my husband really loved this book. When it comes to fantasy characters, dwarves are often his favorite. This book is obviously about some sort of a fantasy world that has different kinds of clans of dwarfs there, and dwarves are the main characters. According to my husband also, the writing is really great, the characters are really great. This is the first book in a series. He does say that the second and I think third are also good, but beyond that it just gets a little less good. They are going to do a series or a movie out of it, or a game. Something. They're going to do something. Wow, I'm really bad. I have such a short memory. I should have just written everything. But anyway, he is really excited about this book. I would love to read this too, but I think that I will either wait until my German gets a lot better, so I'll be able to read it in the original language, because I always prefer to read in the original language. If not, I'll just read it in English. Right now, I cannot read such a long book in German, unfortunately, but if you do speak it, it was translated to English as well. If you like fantasy, if you like good writing, good character build, and books that talk about characters that are usually side characters, then check this out. Now it's one book before last, and this is definitely the book with the most nostalgia in it and maybe most emotional weight, maybe except the last one. And this book is actually not fiction, and it's still in German like the last one, and it's a cookbook for kids. It's this one. It's an Asterix cooking book for kids, and it's called Kochspaß mit Asterix Essen wie Gott in Gallien, which translates to fun in cooking with Asterix, eat like God in Gaul, I think it was called. So not only did my husband grow up with Asterix, whether it was the comics or the movies, he also grew up cooking, and this was a very important kind of a family thing. He used to cook ever since he was a little kid with his brother and with his mother, and it was like their quality time together. And obviously as a kid they used this book. Actually there is one recipe here that was made so many times. I actually did it. We did it. It's a very simple recipe. It's spaghetti with salmon and cream. It's delicious. And it's very funny because you can go through this book and look at the pages, and this one page with the pasta recipe is so dirty that you know that this recipe was very, very loved and used. I told you my husband is a photographer. Not only that, he's also a cook, so everything cooking related is very important to him, and this is kind of a combination between the quality time that he had with his mother and brother. We don't live in the same country, so it's a little difficult, so this book is really a good reminder of these sort of good times together, also a reminder of cooking in general, something that he really, really loves, and asterisk, something that's really, really fun. So like I said, this book is very nostalgic. It also brings out a lot of fun and kind of combines a lot of things in his life that he loves. And we're down to the last book. And like I said, this book is the most special one, is the #1 favorite book. And it's a book that I actually read myself. And this book is called Dragon Song by Anne McCaffrey. She is his favorite author, and this is the first book of a trilogy that is a part of a bigger world that this author wrote about, called The Dragon Riders of Pern. Now, why is this book so special? Well, like me, my husband is a very big bookworm, but unlike me, up until he was 16, he did not read. He didn't like books. Then one day he and his mother were in a library and he saw this book and thought, you know, maybe I should start read it. It seems interesting, and he seemed to like it so much that I actually let him take it. And from this moment on, he fell in love with books in general and with Anne McCaffrey's books in particular. And because this book is what got him into this fantastic, wonderful world of reading, this book is so special. And on a personal note, like I said, also read this book. And I'm not usually a person who feels that way and who admits it, but this book moved me to tears. I don't think this will be the reaction that every person will get, but there was something about this book, an aspect that I identified so much that I felt like I was about to cry, and this does not happen, like, ever. So this is also a general recommendation for Anne McCaffrey's books. If you like fantasy, if you like dragons, who doesn't like dragons? And if you also like really interesting stories with like full worlds, because like I said, there is an entire world. She wrote so many books about this world of the Dragon Riders of Pern, and also strong female characters, which is always a good thing to read about. And that's it for my husband's favorite 10 books. I really hope you enjoyed it. I still think that you can learn a lot about a person from his favorites, and I kind of like that he chose like fiction and photography and a cookbook and comics and all these things. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to click like to show it and to subscribe to my channel if you dare. If there is any specific book from this list that you really like and you would recommend me to read, or you want me to do a review on, or anything like that, feel free to write it down below. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.